Donkey Kong was in arcades.
Yes.
And that's probably the best news of all. No offense to Brian.
No, totally.
Donkey Kong is a sublime arcade experience. It's so wonderful. It's 4 stages of just colorful, difficult, engaging perfection. Great graphics, great sound, recognizable characters. Our first appearance of our friend Mario. At this point, the Jumpman.
Yeah. Named because this was a very early platformer, but the first platformer where you could jump.
Yeah.
Right. At least the first one of any significance. Yeah.
We got to meet Mario's first girlfriend.
Pauline.
Pauline, yeah.
Exactly. A damsel in distress, another kind of first in this game. Yeah. This is really one of the first places that we run into that trope that's going to become a video game tradition. Designed by Shigeru Miyamoto.
Yep. His first game.
Yeah, and really trying to salvage a terrible situation where Nintendo has created radar scope cabinets and sent them over to America, and no one wants them.
Well, the game that Donkey Kong was built in was bad.
Yeah.
It was a bad game, and then they gutted all those machines in a warehouse in Redmond, Washington, and put in Donkey Kong. And those got sent everywhere, and those were a hit. People could not stop putting quarters in those.
Yeah, thank God they did, right? I remember actually down at my local pantry, my convenience store just down the street, they had gotten that in, and man, this was right when arcades were becoming big, early 80s, the start of that. And they had like 3 or 4 machines down there, and it was great because that was one of my favorite machines of that time. It just played so well, it felt good, and I would go down there, after school and just pump quarters into it. And eventually got pretty good, but it was a pretty darn tough game, too.
It was a really tough game. I think one of the hardest things about Donkey Kong is that it doesn't work with the same sort of conventions that we understand video game progression now. It doesn't go level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, boss, and then you're done.
Right.
It's like level 1, level 2, level 3, hard version of level 2, harder version of level 3, Pie Factory.
Yeah, it jumps all over the place.
Yeah.
And it also dares to ask the immortal question, how high can you get?
Yeah,
that's very important as well.
It was always those damn flames that would switch direction on you mid-jump, too, and you were like, ah.
Yeah.
Significant as a game where you could hit things with a hammer, another important feature in video games as well. But the satisfaction of having those barrels come down, and there's that wonderful sound when you pulled it off, doon, 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 and the score pops up right there. And I think that engagement, maybe more than anything else in that first level as a kid, is what grabbed me. I had friends that babysat me, and they would take any object that they had around and roll it at me, and I would jump over it and go, boom, 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 boom.
I think I remember doing that as a kid, too.
Yeah, it was just funny.
Yeah, even the whole scoring mechanics in the game were weird because you could go very slowly and meticulously and jump over every barrel, and it gave you a better chance of getting to the end. But your score depleted based on your time, so they sort of wanted you to rush through it. And getting to the top faster meant that you got a higher score.
Yeah.
Now, another thing about Donkey Kong was that it sort of became the gold standard for consoles after being released in the arcade. Having the perfect home port of Donkey Kong was the holy grail.
And I would say, I had a friend who had a ColecoVision, and on that console, the console version, to me, that was by far much better than the Atari version.
Oh, well, yeah.
The Atari version was horrible.
Yeah, no offense to poor Gary Kitchen, who programmed the Atari version. There are reasons it was so bad.
Right?
Yeah, there was only so much you could do with it. The Coleco version did better. Nobody ever got it perfect. I thought the Atari 800 version was really good.
Right.
The ColecoVision version was pretty good. Even the NES version that came along later was not perfect.
Well, it was missing the Pie Factory level, which was actually the weird level that was missing from almost every single version that Nintendo ever put out after that, until I believe a few years ago.
Right.
They finally, I don't know what sort of legal thing they pulled that they actually had to go into a court and fight for the Pie Factory.
But even that version isn't arcade perfect, and that's a funny thing. We're not sure Nintendo actually owns the code to arcade Donkey Kong. They obviously own the property, but it may be that they farmed it out to possibly some people that were connected with like Congo Bongo and Zaxxon, and that they may not actually own the source code to their own arcade game, which may be why we've never seen it done absolutely perfectly since.
What a strange name for a game, though, too, right?
Yeah, there's
Donkey Kong.
Conflicting stories about how they came up with that. One is that it was a simple mistranslation. The other is that
that it was Monkey Kong, right?
Yeah, they're trying to make Monkey Kong.
And a little English got in.
The other is that it was on purpose because they were trying to convey that it was a stubborn gorilla, so they chose donkey like he's stubborn as a donkey.
Right, there's some guy with an English dictionary in Kyoto just going, what's a synonym for stubborn? Donkey, there we go. All right, who knows. And of course it gets tied up, later on. They get sued for that name.
By Universal.
Exactly. Who it turns out knew full well they had no right to sue them in the first place because they defended one of their own cases by saying, oh, no, King Kong's in the public domain. Then they come along and try to sue them for using King Kong, got caught, and thus began the meteoric ascent of Howard Lincoln.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a wild time back then.
Yeah.
It's probably hard to overestimate the importance of Donkey Kong to Nintendo.
Yeah.
It sort of like made their arcade business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Made their arcade business and really, made their mascot.
Yeah, all this was going to be, and that mascot part, this was almost a Popeye game, too. You know, Mario was kind of a...
So, Nintendo was trying to work out a deal to create a Popeye game, but it hadn't fallen into place yet. But you can see a lot of similarities between Donkey Kong and the Popeye game they would eventually make.
Yep.
Yeah, totally.
Right, they still had girders. It was still, a platformer.
Still like a love triangle between these two characters.
Bluto's kind of like Donkey Kong.
exactly.
Donkey Kong's a really important character to Nintendo too. I mean, he actually appeared in Donkey Kong Country, which was like one of the most. It was sort of for its time on Super Nintendo. That was the game that was just like. That's the best graphics in the world. I've never seen anything like that. And then a few years later, there was Donkey Kong 64, which was the opposite of that. And after that, there was Donkey Kong Country for the Wii was actually one of the best-selling games on Wii.
Yeah.
And Donkey Kong's just always been this weird character they've stuck with. He makes no sense. He's a gorilla with a business tie.
Well, he's
Sometimes he's a good guy, sometimes he's a bad guy.
He's the kind of
makes no
character
sense.
that can only exist in a video game. And the same kind of in a way with Mario. You know, I think it was Jen Frank who said once that Mario is the video game character. He is the jump man, and he will jump over anything you throw at him.
Yep.
And he's the kind of character that can only exist in that medium, but he's perfect for it. I think Donkey Kong's a lot the same way.
There's so many. You talked about the sound effects before, but I feel like there's so many iconic sounds from the game, like when you die and it's like. And
Mario has that halo over his head because he actually died.
Absolutely.
It's crazy.
That's how you know he's the good guy, though,
Yeah,
too.
that's
true. Oh, okay.
He's an angel.
I'll be on the bus walking down the street and I'll just be like,
So good.
Do you start doing like, jumping up in the air as you go?
And I remember I probably spent the most of the time with the NES version, which isn't arcade perfect, but I thought it was, I didn't know any better when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I loved when you actually defeated Donkey Kong and he fell down in the girders and his eyes like popped open really big. It was like so cartoony.
Yeah, it looked like he had actually died and his eyes had bulged out of his head. It was really gross.
Yeah.
A little bit of Mountain and the Viper going on here.
You have a memory about Donkey Kong in real life. Well, that was what you were saying earlier.
Yeah, my little jumping over things. That's what I remember.
Donkey Kong was actually the first video game I ever played. It was,
really?
It was in a pizza place in Jersey City, New Jersey. And I remember specifically my dad lifting me up and holding me so I could play the game. And 27 years later or so, I bought a Donkey Kong arcade cabinet and refinished it and repainted it and everything, and then donated it to Sam Claiborne, who works at IGN, because he's got a whole basement full of arcades.
Those arcade machines are beautiful. They have wooden coin boxes inside, like these handcrafted, and they were all shipped over from Japan. They were assembled here, but they were made in Japan and sent over.
Yeah.
So they've got kind of this loving wooden craftsmanship inside. Claiborne was telling me about that.
I love, too, just the colorful, I remember the side art on that cabinet as well.
Great.
Just, very cartoonish, but, they're very colorful and brought out on that game. It was really neat. It was very eye-catching.
It's on like Donkey Kong. It's still a thing that people say.
Yep.
Donkey Kong's going to be in Pixels, the movie coming out this summer.
He was pretty much the inspiration for Wreck-It Ralph.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And fun fact, Eminem is one of the 20 best Donkey Kong players in the world and will often tweet out his scores.
I did not know that.
I did not know that.
What?
Marshall
That's
Mathers.
awesome. Yeah. That's great.
I'll be. Well done, Marshall.